He needed a hit. But more than that, he needed something real. The movie years had been a slow grind. They had sanded down his edges. They turned the lightning bolt into a light bulb. He was singing to race cars and clam bakes. He was becoming a caricature of himself. Everyone knew it. He knew it most of all. Then came the comeback, the black light. The fire was back in his eyes. He reminded the world who he was. He wasn't just a movie star. He was a force of nature. And after that, he went back to Memphis to record. Not in some sterile Hollywood studio. He went to American Sound Studio, a gritty, soulful place. He was going home in more ways than one. He was looking for songs, real songs, songs with blood in them, and a young songwriter named Mac Davis had written something. It was a story, a sad one. It was a little folk song almost, a narrative about a cycle of poverty and violence. It was set in a slum in Chicago. It was about a boy being born, growing up hungry, buying a gun, and dying in the street. And then another baby is born. The cycle starts again. The people around him were nervous. His record label, RCA, didn't want it. They told him it was a protest song. It was too political. It would alienate his conservative fans. They saw it as a risk, a business risk. They wanted him to sing love songs. They wanted him to be safe. The man who managed his career, Colonel Tom Parker, definitely didn't want him to do it. It wasn't part of the formula. The formula made money. This song was a question mark. But Elvis heard it differently. He didn't hear a political statement. He heard a story about a person. He heard a cry for help. He heard something that felt true. He insisted. He told them he was going to record it. He fought for the song. And that raises the real question. Why? Why this song? Why did a story about a poor kid in a northern city matter so much to the biggest star on the planet? A man who lived in a mansion surrounded by every luxury imaginable. To understand, you have to go back. All the way back. Before the gold records. Before the movies. Before the screaming crowds. You have to go back to a little two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi. A house his father, Vernon, built with his own hands. It was a shotgun shack. You could open the front door and the back door and fire a shotgun straight through without hitting a wall. There was no electricity at first, no running water. The bathroom was an outhouse. This is where he was born. In that little house on a cold January morning. He wasn't born alone, he had a twin brother, Jesse Guerin. Jesse was born first, stillborn, or dead before he could take a breath. That loss haunted the family forever. It haunted Elvis his whole life. He always felt like a part of him was missing. He grew up talking to his brother who was never there. Think about that. From his very first moment on Earth, he was linked to a life that never got a chance. A life cut short before it could even begin. The story in that song about a young man dying with so much life left to live wasn't an abstract idea for him. It was a shadow he was born into. The idea of a lost boy was part of his own origin story. They were poor, not just a little short on cash, they were deeply, fundamentally poor. The kind of poor that marks you. Vernon struggled to find work. He drove a truck. He did odd jobs. He even served time in prison for forging a check for a few dollars. Just a few dollars. Imagine the desperation. While his father was away, Elvis and his mother, Gladys, were on their own. They lost the little house, they had to move in with relatives, they were dependent on the charity of others. Elvis knew what it was like to be hungry. He knew what it was like to wear secondhand clothes. He knew the shame of being the poor kid. They lived on the other side of the tracks, literally. They were poor white trash. That was the label. A label meant to keep you in your place. He knew what it felt like to be looked down on, to be seen as less than. So when he heard a song about a boy born to a mama who's so hungry that she can't even afford to feed another hungry mouth, he didn't have to imagine it. He had lived it. His mother had lived it. He understood that gnawing fear, that feeling that the world is a hard place and you're starting 100 yards behind everyone else. And it wasn't just about being poor, it was about where they were poor. In Tupelo, their little house was in a black neighborhood. He grew up playing with black kids. He grew up hearing their music. From his house, he could hear the singing from the Pentecostal church down the road. It was raw, it was passionate, it was full of pain and hope. It got inside him. When the family moved to Memphis, things weren't much better. They lived in Lauderdale Courts, which was a public housing project. It was a step up, but it was still a place for people with nothing. In Memphis, he found Beale Street, the heart of black music and culture in the city. He wasn't a tourist there. He was a student. He would stand outside the clubs listening. He absorbed the blues. He felt the soul. This wasn't appropriation for him, it was just the music he loved. The music that spoke to him, it was the sound of struggle. The sound of real life. Not only gospel music, both black and white, was his foundation. Those songs were stories of hardship, of faith, of looking for a little light in the darkness. He saw the injustice of the segregated South. He wasn't a political activist. He never marched, he never gave big speeches about civil rights. That wasn't his way. But he saw people as people. The music he sang was a blend of everything he'd heard. Country, gospel, rhythm, and blues. He mixed it all together. And in doing so, he broke down cultural walls, whether he meant to or not. He had a deep, personal respect for the black artists he learned from. He knew he owed them a debt. So when he heard the song set in a ghetto, he didn't see it as a story about another world. He saw the connections. He understood that poverty had a similar taste, no matter the color of your skin. He had lived in a ghetto, just a different kind, a rural, southern kind. He knew the feeling of being trapped, of being born into a situation that feels impossible to escape. The song talks about a cold and gray Chicago morning. He knew the cold, damp Mississippi mornings. He could translate the feeling. The geography was different, but the desperation was the same. His background gave him the empathy to sing the song honestly. And he wasn't a rich guy pretending to understand. He was a rich guy who remembered, with perfect clarity, what it felt like to be a poor boy. Then you have to look at the timing. The year was 1969, but the groundwork was laid in 1968. That was a brutal year for America, a year the country seemed to be tearing itself apart. And the epicenter of one of its greatest tragedies was his own city. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in Memphis in April 1960. The city was in shock. The nation was in mourning and rage. The fight for social justice was on every television screen. It was raw. It was real. It was happening right outside his door. Elvis was sheltered, yes. He lived behind the gates of Graceland, but he wasn't blind. He wasn't deaf. He watched the news. He felt the tension in the air. The country was grappling with poverty, race, and violence. The very themes of the song. The story of a young man turning to crime because he has no other options, and the system that fails him was no longer just a story. It was the headline. It was the reality of the moment. The song was written before King's death, but by the time Elvis recorded it, it had a new weight. A new urgency. It felt incredibly relevant. It was a commentary on the very issues that were causing so much pain. For him to sing this song in Memphis less than a year after the assassination was a powerful act. It was his way of acknowledging the pain, his way of saying, I see it, I understand. He wasn't making a speech, he was bearing witness through a song. This was all happening at a crucial point in his own life. The '68 comeback special had been a massive success. He had shed the skin of the silly movie character. As he was an artist again. He was hungry to prove it. He wanted to make music that mattered. He was done with the fluff. He was 34 years old. He was a father. He was thinking about his legacy. He wanted to create something with substance, something that would last. The sessions at American Sound were his chance to do that. He was working with a producer, Chips Moman, and a house band that was legendary for its soulful, gritty sound. They had created hits for Dusty Springfield, Neil Diamond, and many others. This was a real band in a real studio. There was no Hollywood polish. He was back to his roots musically. He was singing blues, country, soul. He was singing with a passion he hadn't shown in years. And into this environment came this quiet, dark story song. It was a perfect fit for what he was trying to do. It was serious, it was emotional, it was a challenge, and he rose to it. He poured all of his own history, his own pain, his own understanding of the world into his performance. You can hear it in his voice. There's a sadness there, a tenderness, a sense of resignation. He's not just singing the words, he's telling the story as if he knows the people in it. Because, in a way, he did. He knew the mother in the song. He saw his own mother, Gladys. Gladys had worshipped him. She was a nervous, anxious woman who had lost her firstborn son. She poured all of her love and all of her fear into her surviving child. She worried about him constantly. Even when he was the most famous man in the world, she worried. She was terrified of losing him. She died young in 1958 at only 46. Her death broke him. It was the great trauma of his life. He never really got over it. The song is framed by a mother's pain. It begins with a baby crying and a mother weeping. It ends with another baby being born into the same hopeless situation. He would have connected with that on a profound level. He knew what a mother's love and a mother's fear felt like. He knew the devastation of that loss. Singing about that mother's pain was a way of connecting with his own. It gave him a way to express a piece of his own deepest grief. And there's another, more subtle layer. By the late 1960s, Elvis himself was trapped. It was a different kind of ghetto, a gilded one, but it was a prison nonetheless. He was a prisoner of his own fame. He couldn't walk down the street, he couldn't go to a store. He was surrounded by the same group of people day in and day out. His life was rigidly controlled by his manager. His creative choices were often made for him. He was isolated, he was lonely, The song is about a cycle you can't escape. A boy is born into poverty, and that poverty dictates his entire life. His fate is sealed from the beginning. Did Elvis feel a strange kinship with that? Did he feel that his own fate was sealed? That he was trapped in the life of Elvis Presley, unable to escape and just be a normal person? The song's theme of a predetermined, inescapable path might have resonated with his own feelings of being stuck on a treadmill he couldn't get off. He fought for the song because it was personal. It connected every part of his life. It was his childhood in Tupelo. It was his love for black music and culture. It was his response to the turmoil he saw in his country and his own city. It was a tribute to his mother's memory. It was an expression of his own feelings of being trapped. It was a chance to use his enormous platform to say something human. Not political, human. The song ends with a simple, powerful plea. It asks us not to turn a blind eye. It says that the boy who dies in the street could be you or me. It's a call for empathy. A call to look at the world and see the humanity in others, especially those who are struggling. And maybe that's what he wanted to do most of all. He spent his life being looked at. People saw an icon, a legend, a king, but with this song, he was trying to look back out at the world. He was trying to see and to make others see. He didn't need the money. He didn't need another hit, not really. He needed to feel something. He needed to sing something that felt true in his bones. This song was true. It came from a place of deep personal understanding. It was the story of a poor boy who never got a chance, sung by another poor boy who, by some miracle, did. He knew how easily their roles could have been reversed. That's why he had to sing it. He understood the story of a boy growing up angry and poor in a place that offered him no way out. He knew that world, because he had come from it. He was singing about the life he had managed to escape. Well, he was singing for the ones who didn't. He was singing in the ghetto.